Hello, this is Little Green Ghouls, and welcome back to Goosebumps Revisited, Series 2000. This week, I'm excited to visit Jekyll and Heidi. I was pretty indifferent going into this one, but it ended up being a nice surprise. Given the title, it was pretty obvious where this book was headed, but Stein does a nice job building up a protagonist to root for, as well as getting old-school gothic with a castle-esque setting. Despite being a clear homage to the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Stein still manages to fit in a couple of his own twists. It's worth reading if you haven't yet. This 1999 cover is reportedly one of Tim Jacobs' favorites, and I can see why. There's a lot going on with this classic mad scientist laboratory, and we have Heidi peeking over the table, while Dr. Jekyll gets more monstrous than he ever does in the book. There was no merchandise this week, but I'm making up for it by showing some of the 9,000 Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde adaptations that have appeared over the last 100 years. Our front take says, half human, half beast, which is pretty accurate for where this story goes eventually, but let's check out the back of this book. I gripped the banister and gaped in silence as Uncle Jekyll staggered into the house. His white hair shot out wildly from his head, as if he had been shocked with electricity. His pale eyes bulged. His face was smeared with dirt. I wanted to disappear. I didn't want him to see me. I didn't want him to explain where he had been or what he had done. Okay, let's start this summary. The book opens with an introduction to Heidi Davidson, and she's a sad girl who writes sad poetry, but for good reason. Her parents were both killed in a car accident, and she is currently being bused to live with her mad scientist uncle, Dr. Palmer Jekyll. With a name like that, you know Heidi is in for some shit. Heidi will also be living with her same-aged cousin, Mariana, so she won't be completely alone in this small village in northern Vermont. The last time Heidi met these people was when she was 5 years old, and all she remembers is that they lived in an old, enormous mansion. Based off her description, this is sounding a lot like the house in I Am Your Evil Twin, which also came stocked with a mad scientist. Heidi recalls asking her uncle if he was Frankenstein, so Stein is really going for an old-timey mad scientist vibe for this book, which I appreciate. If you're gonna have a mad scientist, you might as well go all out with it. Stein dropped some fun Vermont trivia too, because Heidi's admiring the beautiful billboard-free landscapes of Vermont, since apparently Vermont, along with Hawaii, Alaska, and Maine, do not allow billboards in their state. Heidi gets so lost in her thoughts and admiring the beautiful sights of Vermont that she doesn't notice when the bus stops and the driver has to prompt her to get off. She wanders to the bus station alone looking for Uncle Jekyll, but he's nowhere to be found. It's 1999, so she dials 411 on a payphone and tries to get a hold of her Uncle Jekyll, but the operator regrets to inform her that his number is unlisted and she can't give it out. Heidi is feeling defeated when a voice startles her. She at first thinks it was a crow she was admiring earlier, but when she turns around, she spots a boy her age who introduces himself as Aaron. It's winter break, so he doesn't have school, and naturally likes to spend time at the abandoned bus station like all children do. The two kids chit-chat for a bit, but when Aaron learns that Heidi is heading to the Jekyll house, he is horrified and declares that Uncle Jekyll is a monster. Heidi just laughs it off because she thinks he's referencing the titular The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which I've just been assuming everyone is familiar with. Basically, Dr. Jekyll drinks a potion and becomes the evil Mr. Hyde. My knowledge of this comes from the Wishbone episode I saw in kindergarten, and the Arthur musical episode.
Good and evil, 'cause I was Jekyll, Jekyll, Hyde, Jekyll, Hyde, Hyde, Jekyll, 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 Hyde, Jekyll, Hyde.
The songs from this episode still hold up. I may have just watched the whole thing. But back to Heidi and Aaron. He starts screaming at her how he's not joking and goes on to explain how a mysterious ugly beast has been attacking the village. The creature has destroyed houses, stores, injured people, and everyone thinks Dr. Jekyll has something to do with it. I was thinking it would be way too obvious if it really was the uncle, and it's probably cousin Mariana. Heidi accuses Aaron of just trying to scare her, and goes on to explain the difference between fiction and non-fiction, which I always have to remind myself is fake and not fake. You'd think that knowledge would have sunken in by now, but it still requires self-prompting. My brain just rejects those labels. It's like saying February out loud when spelling February. Heidi has had enough of Aaron and asks him to point which way she needs to walk because she can't just spend all day standing at this bus station. Aaron informs her it's only a 20-minute walk up the road, but might take longer because of all the snow. Heidi asks if he'll come with her, but he refuses and straight up says he doesn't want to die. She sets off on her own in her Doc Martens because that's the only shoe Stein knows of, along with black lycra bike shorts. They're both icons of Goosebumps fashion. She walks through the village, which is only 2 blocks long, and eventually reaches her Uncle Jekyll's mansion, and it's even creepier than she remembered. She thinks it looks just like an old castle you would see in a black and white horror movie. Heidi nearly cries at the idea of living there, but stops herself and tries to view this as the start of her new life and a new adventure. When she reaches the door, it opens slowly to set the mood, and Mariana pokes her head out to say hello. Except instead of a warm welcome, she hisses at her to get away while she still can. Before Heidi can say anything, a maid appears and welcomes Heidi into the house. She introduces herself as Sylvia, while Mariana just stares vacantly. Sylvia leaves to make some hot cocoa, forcing Heidi to try to make some small talk with her cousin. She doesn't get very far with this though, as Mariana only gives short, curt answers. Heidi can't tell if Mariana is just shy or actually unfriendly. They eventually get to a small house tour, and Mariana solidifies herself as unpleasant because when Heidi suggests that she hopes that they could become like sisters, Mariana just scoffs at her. Uncle Jekyll's in the lab this whole time and can't be bothered to come out to say hello to his orphaned niece. It's feeling like poor Heidi found herself more in a series of unfortunate events book rather than a Goosebumps one. When they reach Heidi's room, she's pleasantly surprised to see her room is actually pretty nice and has a great view of the village down below. Mariana keeps sarcastically replying to Heidi's attempts at enthusiasm, so Heidi just confronts her directly, asking if she's in a bad mood, which Mariana again just scoffs at. I would have a hard time with this, because I'd be like, so sorry my parents dying and me becoming an orphan is so inconvenient for your rude ass. While admiring her enormous closet, Heidi gets choked up at the idea of leaving her old life behind, and when she emerges, Mariana is gone. Heidi decides to go say hi to her uncle against Mariana's advice, but once outside the lab door, she can hear frightened pig squeals on the other side. She's hesitant to go in, but she has to see what all the commotion is about, and is shocked, not by some monster creature, but by how old her uncle looks. He's surprised to see her and drops the guinea pig he was just tormenting. Do guinea pigs squeal like pigs? Uncle Jekyll is much friendlier than Mariana and gives Heidi a big old hug while apologizing profusely for forgetting her. In the lab, Heidi can see cages of rats and guinea pigs, and also hears a dog howling somewhere in the lab, so I guess Uncle Jekyll has no problem experimenting on animals. Heidi and Uncle Jekyll spend some time attempting to bond, but when Heidi brings up the rumors about a supposed beast escaping his lab, this infuriates him and he throws Heidi out of the lab and slams the door, denying there being anything beast-like around here. Heidi is standing in the hallway alone and stunned by how quickly things went sour. This whole book has a depressing classic gothic horror feeling to it. Heidi is straight up on her own in this old castle with an unstable mad scientist. It's kind of fun. Heidi is then startled when Sylvia grabs her by the shoulder from behind and offers to help her unpack. She then tries to manipulate Heidi by telling her that Dr. Jekyll is under a lot of pressure and he really is a nice man, like she just didn't experience a freak out like 2 seconds ago. Once they're done unpacking in her room, Heidi knocks on Mariana's door, but gets straight up ignored. This would be the start of a very contentious relationship for me. Like, you want to play that way, Mariana? It's on. Heidi finds herself wishing school was open so she could at least make some friends. She explores the house solo and discovers many dusty, empty rooms and various libraries. She then comes across a room that gives her some pause, because the walls are covered in deep scratch marks and shredded wallpaper, like some sort of animal was turned loose in there. It sounds like the West Wing.
What's in the West?
It's forbidden!
Heidi backs out of the room slowly and right into Mariana, who tries to convince Heidi that this was the work of George the cat. She basically says George has separation anxiety and went nuts when he accidentally got locked in there. Heidi finds this dubious at best and wants to meet George, but she can't because Uncle Jekyll supposedly put him to sleep. This cat sounds like George Glass. They are then summoned for dinner, where they find Uncle Jekyll seated in an enormous dining room. They go on to have a pleasant dinner with some proper New England clam chowder, and Heidi starts to feel a little bit more relaxed. The conversation turns to science, and Uncle Jekyll goes on to say how he felt the original Dr. Jekyll got a bad rap, because in order to make a potion to completely transform a person, you'd have to be a brilliant scientist. During this, Mariana gets really awkward and keeps telling her dad to change the subject, but he just keeps blathering on about how inspiring he finds Dr. Jekyll. That night, Heidi heads to bed, and right as she's drifted off to sleep, she's jolted awake by a high, shrill scream right outside her bedroom window. She races over to the window, and she sees nothing directly outside, but when she looks down toward this village, she can see a lot of commotion. She sees people darting between houses with flashlights, can hear sirens wailing, and decides to run downstairs to notify Uncle Jekyll. She finds his bed unslept in, and concludes he must still be in his lab, but once in the lab, he's still missing. She notices a partially drunk glass of some thick, green, foul-smelling liquid on the lab table. This sends Heidi's mind racing as she wonders if her uncle chugged some of this mystery liquid, transformed into a beast, and is off terrorizing the village. Heidi wanders the house some more, looking for signs of her uncle, and then watches as the front door flings open and her uncle appears. He's all muddy, with wild hair and torn clothes. She doesn't have time to hide properly, so she's quickly spotted. He wants to know what she's doing up so late, and she wants to know what the fuck he was just up to. But he just tells her a story about going for a midnight walk to clear his mind and slipping in some slick grass. She asks him about the screams from the village, and he insists he didn't hear anything out there. She finds this hard to believe, and he suggests that she just ignore all that if she wants to have a happy time here. She can't quite figure out if this is good advice or a veiled threat. It's a pretty clear threat to me. Heidi returns to bed and ends up sleeping in very late after all the excitement of the past day. When she heads downstairs for a late breakfast, she overhears Mariana and Uncle Jekyll arguing. Mariana is shouting how she can't take it anymore and can't live with all the lies and secrets, while Uncle Jekyll promises her that she won't have too much longer. Heidi coughs while spying, and the argument comes to a halt before we can get any more details on the situation. Heidi's not letting this go though, because after breakfast she confronts Mariana in her room. Mariana is playing with her hamster Ernie, who she declares is her only friend in the world, and denies having any sort of argument with her father. Heidi's like, cut the shit. I heard you talking about secrets and lies, and I heard all the chaos in the village last night. Mariana then freaks out and tells Heidi to back off or she'll regret it, and in the process of this little freakout, has squeezed poor hamster Ernie to death. I thought this would be a chapter cliffhanger fakeout, but nope, Mariana crushed Ernie. The Series 2000 books are not kind to fluffy little creatures. Mariana blames Heidi for Ernie's death and throws her out of her room, leaving Heidi alone to process the horror movie situation she's in. She decides she needs a break from this dreary house and goes for a bike ride. Right when she's starting to relax and feel free, she comes across the destruction from last night. She spots a shed in someone's backyard that's been fully turned on its side, and a fence that's been torn apart like a tornado rolled through. She continues her tour through town and spots smashed cars and stores that have had their windows knocked in. She tries to ask what happened, but people just look at her in disbelief for not already knowing. The destruction sounds a lot like the kind we saw in Attack of the Graveyard Ghouls, when the ghouls were trashing the neighborhood. Heidi then spots Aaron from the bus station being interviewed by a TV reporter. He goes on to say that the beast came running down the hill at 11 last night and started trashing the town. He says the beast appears to be half human and is covered in gray fur. A woman in the crowd shouts at the reporter to go interview Dr. Jekyll, since they all know he has something to do with the beast. This prompts Heidi, for reasons unknown, to defend her uncle and to shout there's no beast in their house. I don't know why she's speaking so confidently on this when she has her own suspicions. The crowd then turns on Heidi, shouting, "She's a Jekyll! Get her!" The reporter tries to intervene and wants an exclusive look into the Jekyll house, so Heidi has to remind this woman that she's a child and it's not her house. The crowd continues to grow angry, and it's never good to be on the receiving end of mob justice, so Heidi pedals back to the mansion. She spends the rest of her day exploring the house some more and reading books. Uncle Jekyll has a phone installed in her room, which she's thrilled about and quickly calls her best friend Patsy back at home. Heidi dives right into all the weird shit that's been happening when she hears some odd noises on the phone. It occurs to her that somebody's listening in, so she races downstairs and spots Uncle Jekyll sitting by the phone, quickly picking up a book to pretend to read. This leads Heidi to feeling even more trapped and unsafe than before, now knowing that her every move is being monitored. That night, she has nightmares of being chased by a beast across a snowy field. The beast she's picturing sounds nearly full-on werewolf, with fangs, claws, and yellow drool. In the dream, the beast catches her and bites her right on the shoulder. When she awakens from her nightmare, she crawls out of bed and decides to read a book to calm herself back down. While reaching for a book on the top shelf, she trips and bumps into a shelf revealing a secret compartment in the bookcase. She reaches on in and pulls out a book. At first, this is a bit of a disappointment until she realizes it's an old diary, which she then promptly reads. So cold today, the snow coming down in sheets, driven by the howling winds. I know I will howl soon too. I cannot control it. I will go out into the storm, because the storm inside of me is more powerful than any snowstorm. Huh? I stared at the yellow page, gripping the little book tightly in my lap. What was this person writing about? A storm inside of him? Was this some kind of poetry? I turned a few more pages and began to read again. I know what I did tonight. I remember every scream, every cry of horror. Those poor people. They don't deserve it. They don't deserve me. But I am powerless to control it. At night, when the urge comes over me, when my body makes the hideous change, I must go out. What choice do I have? I must run and rage and howl. I must feed. I know what I am on those terrifying but exciting nights. I'm like a wild beast, and I live for the screams and for the fear I create. Whoa, I murmured. My heart pounded in my chest. Wind rattled on the window panes. I pulled the quilt from the bed over my chair and snuggled under it. I started to read another page. Of course, I am human most of the time. A caring, frightened human. A human prisoner in this old house, and a prisoner inside this body that changes at night. A prisoner in this body I cannot control. Where does this rage come from? From where does this anger spring? The anger that forces me to kill and destroy. There are two of us trapped here. Two prisoners, the beast and the doctor. Heidi then wonders if this diary belonged to the original Dr. Jekyll, and thinks maybe her Uncle Jekyll came across it and somehow learned to make his evil potion. But before she can find out more, she hears footsteps coming towards her room and the door swings open. Except not really. As Heidi is cowering under the covers, she realizes the wind just blew the door open somehow. Okay then, guess we needed some chapter filler. She goes back to perusing the diary and carefully looks for any signs of a secret formula, but doesn't find it and puts the diary back in the secret compartment. We then get some sloppy editing because 2 paragraphs later, she's right back to wondering if the secret formula was written in the diary and if her uncle found it, as if she didn't just establish there was no formula in it. Stein then decides to bump this story right along, and within half a page, it's the next night and Heidi is hiding in Uncle Jekyll's laboratory. She managed to find a locker full of towels and climbed on in. She then watches as Uncle Jekyll plays with various beakers full of colorful liquids and tries to convince herself that maybe he's working to find a cure for some strange disease, or anything more positive than a monster-making formula. This hope is short-lived though, because soon Uncle Jekyll is busy chugging potions. He swallowed noisily and licked his lips. He then braced himself. He flattened both hands on the tabletop and leaned forward, as if waiting for the liquids to do something to him. I stared through the narrow opening. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move. Leaning hard against the tabletop, Uncle Jekyll shut his eyes. His mouth twisted, his knees started to collapse. Grabbing the tabletop, keeping himself standing, he opened his mouth and let out a shrill howl of pain. His eyes bulged and rolled in his head, his face turned bright red. Another painful howl escaped his throat, an animal howl, a wolf howl. He clamped his eyes shut. He pounded the table with both hands. He tore at his white hair until it stood up in wild tufts. His whole face twisted in agony, and then, with an ugly groan from deep in his belly, he spun away from the table and staggered out the door, staggered like a wild animal, moaning and growling, and vanished from the lab. Heidi doesn't wait long enough to crawl out of her hiding spot, though, because once she steps out of the lab, she's face to face with Uncle Jekyll because he hasn't left the house yet. He growls that he's sorry she had to see this, and then drags her upstairs, tosses her in her room, and then locks the door. She should feel grateful she just wasn't eaten, but instead she just starts pounding on the door. Heidi then races over to the window, just in time to see Uncle Jekyll stumbling down the hill towards the village. It should be noted though, he isn't fully transformed yet, but she soon hears screams echoing up the mountain. Heidi decides she needs to get out of this locked room in case he changes his mind on eating her when he gets back. She tries to crawl out of her room by dangling from a gutter, but this backfires and she ends up falling out of the window into a heap of snow. Neither I nor Heidi seem to know what her actual plan is, but she's now running towards the village to help her uncle. In the distance, she can see an explosion and hears more screams of terror. As with the graveyard ghouls, there's no way to convince me that someone wouldn't have shot his ass by now. In town, she encounters some cops who tell her to hide inside because the beast is on the loose. Heidi's kinda like, yeah, no shit, when the hairy beast comes leaping towards her from behind a house. It's starting to feel like Uncle Jekyll is a full-on werewolf and he's been looking for a cure. The beast lands on top of Heidi, pinning her face first into the snow with one of its legs. She struggles and tries to reason with it, but it keeps her pinned into the snow. Aaron then appears with a baseball bat and starts swinging wildly. Heidi decides now is the time to lay down some detailed plot summary for Aaron and lets him know who the beast is her uncle and she saw him drink the potion. Aaron in turn tells her some detailed info too. The villagers have had enough of these attacks and plan on burning down the mansion tonight with Uncle Jekyll in it. This conversation is happening mid-beast attack, mind you, with Heidi under its foot. The beast then releases Heidi and picks up Aaron instead and tosses him into a fire. I half expected Stein to roast this kid, but nope. He knows how to stop, drop, and roll his way into a snow pile, where he pops back up and tells Heidi he's actually okay. Heidi doesn't know where else to go, so she decides to run back to the mansion. I think I could have found somewhere else to go for the night that isn't scheduled to be burned down, but that's just me. Once back inside the mansion, she realizes Uncle Beast has followed after her, and it occurs to her that she forgot to shut the front door. Because yes, anyone being chased by a monster would forget to shut the door after reaching safety. The questionable decisions just keep coming though, because Heidi settles on heading into her uncle's laboratory and drinking some of the potion herself, so they can have a beast-on-beast cage match. Except once again, this doesn't happen. Turns out there was no more potion in the test tube. You would think this would be fairly obvious to Heidi, considering test tubes are clear glass, but nope, she wanted to drink from an empty tube and a chapter cliffhanger instead. Her beastly uncle then enters the lab and begins snarling at her while knocking lab equipment all around. Heidi tries her best to reason with the creature, but it just keeps walking towards her and swiping at the air. We then have a bit of a plot shakeup, and the actual Uncle Jekyll appears in the doorway and tackles the beast. He holds onto the beast tightly until it slumps over and slowly begins to transform back into Mariana. I thought this was kinda obvious since the start, especially when Stein started getting ambiguous with the potion transformation scene. Uncle Jekyll then goes on to explain that he's been working tirelessly to find a cure for Mariana and tries them all out on himself first to see if they're safe enough for her to try. So I guess the potion he tried earlier just made him howl and growl for funsies, while Beast Mariana tore up the village. Uncle Jekyll then reveals all of this started years ago when they were on a family trip to Europe and their car broke down in a forest. Mariana got bored and wandered off, and when they found her, she told her father she'd been attacked by a mystery creature. Now, nearly every night, she transforms into a monster and terrorizes the village. This moment is then interrupted by chants of, "Kill the beast," like in Beauty and the Beast. It's actually very similar to this scene because a mob of villagers have arrived with torches and start breaking windows and busting down the front door.
Now!
Uncle Jekyll grabs the girls and leads them quickly into the basement. Above them, they can hear the villagers storming the house, and Heidi can smell smoke as the mansion starts to burn above them. Uncle Jekyll leads them to the back of the basement, and after moving some large crates, reveals an escape tunnel that goes beneath the village and out towards the highway. They race down the tunnel, when Heidi suddenly stops because it becomes very important to her that she goes back to retrieve the diary from its hidden compartment because I knew that going up to the house was crazy, but the old diary was too valuable to leave behind. It was probably worth a fortune, and it was a part of history. I couldn't let it burn with the rest of the house. I couldn't let such an important document be lost forever. I had to rescue it. I'm not sure I'd be going back for the sake of history, but you do you, little Dolly Madison. Heidi proceeds to sneak through this burning house, holding her breath in the smoke and dodging villagers until she reaches her bedroom. She's able to locate the diary, but on her way back down to the basement, she's intercepted by some angry men. They demand she take them to the beast while she pretends to know nothing. Aaron appears only partially roasted and defends Heidi, saying she only arrived to the bus station this Monday, so she really doesn't know. The men release Heidi, and she leads Aaron into the basement tunnel with her. Aaron doesn't ask questions and just runs through this mile-long tunnel with Heidi until they reach the other side and are now outside the village. She then watches from a distance as the mansion burns to the ground, with her closest relatives nowhere to be found. Heidi has been through it in this book. Her parents get killed, she's attacked by a beast, an entire village hates her, she loses all of her possessions, and now she's abandoned. It then cuts to Aaron's kitchen later that night, and Heidi's hiding out there until she can contact some different relatives. She shows Aaron the original Dr. Jekyll's diary, but it turns out this diary isn't that old at all, despite being described in great detail as being incredibly old. Aaron shows her one of the very first pages that it says, "This diary is the property of Marina Jekyll." And Heidi's like, wow, how did I miss that? I don't know, girl, you tell me. First, this diary is no longer that old, and now it's clearly labeled. It feels like some classic Stein revisionist bullshit. It's the final page, so we're in for a twist. Heidi reads the latest entry, which states how Mariana has been hiding the diary in Heidi's room, and one night, when she was in full creature form, she snuck into the bedroom and bit Heidi on the shoulder. So, that shoulder bite wasn't a dream after all. Good thing Heidi never noticed the mark. And that's how this one ends, with Heidi realizing not only is she an orphan, without any possessions or close family, but now she's some sort of werewolf too. Overall, I thought Jekyll and Heidi was another solid Series 2000 book. I was worried Stein would struggle with stretching out the plot of this one, but it kept a nice pace and was pretty engaging throughout. It's hard not to root for Heidi, despite some questionable decisions on her part. I enjoyed the atmosphere of this creepy old mansion with a mad scientist and hostile daughter. The scares were a little limited, but the plot actually made up for it. I thought the Mariana twist was a little obvious, despite Stein's attempts to conceal it with vague descriptions. I didn't really enjoy the diary stuff, because I don't think Heidi would have skipped over a page clearly labeled, "This is the property of Marina Jekyll." I'm still gonna give this one 4 out of 5 test tubes. It was fun getting to see Stein's take on a classic horror story. As far as the vomit count goes, we're once again sitting steady with no new vomits. This leaves the Series 2000 total at 11. Well, that's it for Jekyll and Heidi. This book ended up being better than I was anticipating it would be. Next week is Scream School, which I know nothing about. It looks like a melting troll doll on the cover though. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Jekyll and Heidi. What did you think of that ending? Did you want to see Ernie get his revenge? How does testing a potion on yourself work if you don't have the disease? Also, what did you think of my Jekyll and Hyde horror clips this week? I haven't seen most of these myself, but was surprised how many takes there were on this story. Just imagine all the cool stories we could have if Disney hadn't destroyed the laws of public domain for years. Anyways, as always, thanks again for watching, and make sure you subscribe for
the pride, the love.